for a lot of people, they're not familiar with this record. I consider myself, pretty astute when it comes to scriptures. I read 20 to 25 books a month when I was in prison, and I had never heard of this until just a couple of months ago. And so for a lot of people, this is all brand new, even though it's been around for, 10, 15, 20 years. But Joseph, if you wouldn't mind just giving our listeners kind of a brief history or synopsis of what the Mena records are, what the breakoff is, and maybe you shared with me some geography. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen when we get to the geography spot. David, if you could, when he gets there, throw that map up there that I sent you earlier. But yeah, maybe just give our listeners a little bit of history so they can understand what the record is or where it's from.
So nobody should feel bad. The first record is Hagoth. Hagoth wrote the first record in there, and I had to look that up. I got out my thing and did the search, and I'm like, oh, Hagoth is in the Book of Mormon, and I go to find out and read out all about Hagoth.
Well, and let me just, I know you're going to bring this up, but let me just pull up. Literally, you sent this to me, and I'm like, I had to look it up. I had to go to, what was it? Alma 63.
Alma 63.
And I'm like, there were 5,400 people. I'm going to just read it because I've read the Book of Mormon 100 times. And I went
right over your head.
Right over it says, and it came to pass that in the 37th year of the reign of the judges, there was a large company of men, even to the amount of 5,400 men, and their wives and their children departed out of the land of Zarahemla into the land which was northward. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Keep That's going. A lot of people. You're thinking, well, these families of four, these three kids, a husband and a wife. So that multiply that number times 5 or 6 or 7 if the families are bigger. I don't know what their family size is, but you're quickly looking at
30,000 people.
1,000 people, yeah, walking by foot, wherever
going
they started,
north.
Going north, and not coming back. And it says, in a couple verses later, Hagoth built ships and they sailed away, and they came back and got more people, and they sailed away again, and then at some point they're never heard of again. Corianton was a captain of a ship, and he went north as well. So you've got Corianton going north, Hagoth going north, all these ships going north, and
30,000 people on foot walking north, like the pioneers of their day.
Yeah. So I did have to look all that up, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of people right here that took off. And then they described their journey, their path, and we had to grab out the globe and track. Okay, they've said there's an East Sea and there's a West Sea. So like all we know is that Corianton and Hagoth go north by ship. We didn't know which sea they took. It's not until we read the Mena record that we find out that Corianton went north by way of the East Sea, and Hagoth went north by way of the West Sea. So they're on different sides, ascending up to the land northward, but they're going in different. One's going east, northeast, one going northwest.
And they mostly left to flee Babel, like a falling civilization. And we know from reading the Book of Mormon that things were deteriorating pretty quickly, and they wanted to get away from that. So it's kind of similar to our day, where we can see things are getting worse in our civilization. And these people, the Nephite, as they became large groups, they began to have impressions and visions of our day, and then that they would write it down out of their love for us, so that they could help us in our day, because they knew that it was going to be a similar type situation where our society would be coming all about money and possessions and violence and killing. And so it
Now,
gives,
are these,
it gives a lot of prophecy in the book as well, which is amazing because it helps you to prepare for what's coming as well.
are these people Nephites? Are they Lamanites? Are they the people of Ammon? Give me some context of who's going.
They are all of them. There's Nephites, there's Lamanites, there's Ammonites, Zoramites, all the ites that you can think of. They were in there. It's whoever wanted to get away from the Gadianton control and the things that they saw and the spiritual dive that was happening in their area. They changed their name. So they got tired of differentiating, you know, this person's a Nephite, that person's a Lamanite, and continuing that. And they're like, we just want to be one. And they started calling themselves with the name Nemenha. And the word means the people of truth.
The people of truth. That's right. Nemenha means the people of truth.
So they just started calling themselves Nemenha. They didn't want to call themselves any of the ites anymore. And that was the end of it.
And so now, so they all travel, they disperse, and obviously Christ comes. And in this record, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've only gone through it twice. But I think there are two different visitations to two different groups, sets of people. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so groups. Talk to me about that.
The first group that comes up in the book is Hagoth's group. And Hagoth's group had navigated up through basically between Baja California and Mexico, and then got into the Colorado River and went up the Colorado River and eventually ended up in what they call the Mena, which means salt. So you're in the Salt Lake area somewhere, or the Salt Flats, or Salt Sea, or they're in the land of salt. But it's pretty easy to know from the descriptions they give of the canyons, the descriptions they give of the dirt, the color, the flow of it's easy to know like where they're at, where they've gone to. The other group comes later on, and that's from the city of Corianton. They actually call it the city of Corianton, so that's a no-brainer. You're like, well, obviously Corianton, whoever took a ship, wherever they ended up, that was the city they established, because they named the whole city Corianton. So you've got Mena was one of the cities, Corianton is another city. So Mena, the salt area, is where he comes first, and there's a man named Ogoa, something like.
I call him OG. That's what I call him. I just call him Og.
We've had multiple versions. So I've also called him Ogu from one of the earlier versions. But anyways, he's only 4 books in. So the really nice thing is I'll tell a lot of people, hey, just read the first 4 books. It's 36 pages, and it's kind of like getting to be able to read where they came from, how they got there, and the first coming of Christ, like all of 3rd Nephi, all in those first four books. You haven't got very many pages under your belt, but you at that point you've got a testimony of it.
So when Christ comes, though, like they had been waiting for Christ, so they were looking for the sign. They knew the same sign that the Nephites had known, because they came up with copies of the brass plates that they all read down there. Alma sent them with a copy of that. So it wasn't like they were leaving out of faith and like already having a knowledge that Christ was going to come. And so they saw the same signs where there was no night and only day. And then Christ appears to them, and they sing songs, and he blesses the children, and he helps them. He administers the sacrament to them, and everything that you would read in the Nephite experience is there, plus more, like much, much more. He elaborates on what he's been doing in other areas, and he comes back to them and visits them after he goes to Corianton. After he comes at least twice that you can read about. And it's just beautiful because he teaches the same doctrines, has the same love. And that's what I would recommend people if they want to, see if this is something that could be true. Read the first, how many pages? It's like 36 pages, and then you get into Christ.
Or first 4 books. Because a lot of the different
Is Samuel the Lamanite part of the first 4 books? Is the book of Samuel in there?
No, he's further into the record.
Okay.
He's page, on the version I have, he's page 113.
Okay. So, but Samuel the Lamanite, who we are aware of, comes from these people. So when we hear about him in the Book of Mormon, he comes out of nowhere in the Book of Mormon, and this book kind of gives us his origin. And do you remember his genealogy off the top of your head?
He is the grandson of Corianton.
So he would be the great grandson of Alma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yeah.
And so he's half Lamanite, half Nephite, technically, right?
It's actually, so we really learned something awesome in there. So in the record, we learned that they have Nephites, which are light-skinned, but they say that Lamanites and Ammonites are dark-skinned, but they don't differentiate. They call all of the dark-skinned, they call them Lamanites. So when Samuel is called a Lamanite, he still could be an Ammonite. We don't know for sure that he's a Lamanite or an Ammonite. We just know at that point he's got dark skin.
Now, in what I read, he says Samuel the Lamanite's like, great. I mean, I can imagine he's like, okay, I got to go down to the Nephites. I got to call them to repentance. I know they're going to look at me like I'm a Nephite, but I do got green eyes. And so that is something that's a little different as he's describing himself, but he's kind of describing himself like, I know I'm going into enemy territory. I'm not a prophet in their land. They have no idea who I am, and I'm going to have to call them to repentance. Can you imagine what Samuel the Lamanite must have been thinking? Fortunately, he makes it out of there unscathed, and he gets back home, in time to experience and record the coming of Christ. So, okay. So,
Jane,
Trevor, you got questions?
I got a quick question. What books are in the first 32 pages of the record that you have, and what do you have? Do you have a PDF version? Do you have a paper copy?
I have all of them.
Is this book here?
So I started with it would be what they consider a pirated copy of the Mena archive that was given to me, and I actually use all the different versions that I've got for different reasons. The Mena archive version that I have does not have footnotes. And although it's really difficult when you're reading it for the first time, because you'll come across something, you're like, well, I don't know where that is. Well, if you have a footnote, it'll tell you where they believe that location is, or what herb they believe that is, or they've caught a fish. Well, what fish that was probably, or just a lot of different things, or you've got a strange name for something that's obviously associated with the temple. Well, they'll tell you exactly what that is supposed to be. So the footnotes are very, very helpful. But if I'm listening to it in an audio format, and I'll do this a lot, sometimes we're out, and like the latest one, we were out snowboarding, my son and I, all day, and I'm just like, well, I'm just going to stick one earbud in and just listen to. I actually started at Samuel the Lamanite, and we went like, I think 2 books into it, past that, with the drive there, snowboarding, and then the drive home. So in that respect, I really like having one that doesn't have footnotes, because I can just use my audio PDF reader and kind of refresh and go back through things. And it's neat because you hear something different, every single time you go through it.
Like the Book of Mormon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been through it, start to finish at least 3 times. And then all the little different studies, but literally every time I open it, I find something new that I didn't know was there the time before.
So what are the first 32 pages? What books are in there?
There's Hagoth, then there's Hagoth's son, one of his sons. So one of his other sons he got lost at sea. And we hear the story of him, which we always find out, there's Because
Oh,
a lot
I
of
don't
people
I don't
say-
have this in the version I have. I don't
No?
have this. No.
Okay, so I'll get you the links on that.
He's the one that ends up in the Polynesian Islands or the Hawaiian Islands because
Yeah, what's his name?
So
Hagoth, he was Hagoth Jr. or sort of.
Oh, I don't have that.
Once-
Yeah, I don't have that one.
yeah,
And so he got blown off path and they could never get back with the wind. They didn't know
So
how
it
to
was-
sail back.
it was the oceanic currents. They couldn't sail against the oceanic currents. So now I'm not just studying with a globe. Now I'm actually got ocean current charts trying to figure out where they are. And sure enough, if you're like outside of Baja California, all the currents head towards Hawaii.
Wow.
And
Joseph,
then they keep heading. They said they later on you'll hear, because there's a group of people that figured out how to sail. At this point now they're sailing east, but they have landed in Hawaii and then gone further and landed in the Polynesian Islands and gone further. And now they're like talking to short people with weird writing language. You're like, okay, we know kind of where this is at. This is somewhere way on the other side of the world.
But Hagoth, his dad was very sad. They thought that he was just lost and they didn't know. And his dad did die before they were able to make it back in the ships to say, no, we survived. We're here, and so that was a very sweet.
No, he did get a record that they had landed over there and they weren't lost, but they didn't come back.
But he never got to see him.
see his
never
son.
got to see
So-
his son again.
Yeah.
So it's Hagoth Jr. What else is in the 32 pages? Just so that our listeners can go and
Then it goes
experiment
into
on those fruits.
Ogo.
No, that's the third one.
Oh.
Hagoth, Hagmeni was Haggith's son, but that's not the one that was lost. We don't have his record. That would be
Yeah.
with the Polynesian Islands or the Hawaiian Islands or whatever. And then there's somebody named Sanhempet, and then Ogu.
So in those 4 books, you get to Christ.
Yeah.
You get to Christ. But you have to think like you're starting in, so now you're going back and you're like, when did they start?
Because
Alma
in the book
63
of Og, there is Christ's appearance in the book of Og.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ogu.
Ogu, yeah.
Joseph, you and I are got to link up about geography and all this. I'd love to record
Do you
this.
like to study geography?
Well, I've been posting on Book of Mormon, like geography, North American, but your map, which I think we're going to show soon
Yeah.
enough here, it really
Thanks.
repositions everything.
Yeah, I created that map. I was not finding.
Do you want
what I
to
needed
pull it
out
up,
there.
David? Pull up
Yeah,
the
we'll
map
do that.
and just
Hold up.
walk us through the map.
So Joseph, while he's pulling that up, I got a question for you.
Yep.
So the 3 of us, are filming a behind the scenes episode. We're heading to the church office library Monday morning, and we have an appointment to pull the Mena archives that the church has in their church history, and we have permission to film it. So we're going to be pulling out whatever they have. You know more about the different versions. I want to be able to relay that back to you. And
Oh, thanks.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
so one of the questions that I have is, what questions would you be asking about the different archives and
Well, it would be, the only thing would be really to learn what version they have. So, I did write the church. I'm like, hey, I've found this record. Do you know about it? What's the commentary on it? What came back is, it's in our archive. It is number blah, 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 blah. And we have no comment.
I have the version.
That was it. That's all I got. I didn't get a version number or a date or anything other than it's in our thing and we have a record of it.
We're going to film it all.
Great.
Walk us through.
What's the date on the one that you have?
Let me tell you, I'm opening it up right here.
While he's doing that, walk us through this map that we're looking at here. Joseph, give us some of your commentary on this map. What are we looking at?
So I just needed something to kind of go from the different directions of these things. I was able to find out, there were some pictures on the internet that showed Hagoth leading and they had one arrow going east and one arrow going west, but it didn't have, it just had 2 arrows. And I'm like, there's really 4 groups here. The yellow arrow that, I tried to color coordinate it so it all makes sense, but the yellow arrow is that was a guess. I mean, I don't really know if they went up on the east side or not. It just looked really rocky on the other side. So I kind of drew it on where I thought would have been the easiest route. Having been in New Mexico
For 30,000 people, right? We
Yeah.
got to remember we got 30,000 people heading up that way.
So I kind of figured that might be the route that they had took. The red arrow that's Hagoth and going by ship. And it's pretty clear when you're reading it that that's where they're going, because they, hit this red river with huge cliffs. They go all the way up the river, and it's long, and they end up in, the land of the salt. So they end up in Salt Lake area. And we also know from further in the record of Haggis' son being blown off course. So I put that in orange. They were just in a storm and they saw him. They weren't able to make it inside the inlet there, and they got blown off, and all the oceanic currents head straight towards Hawaii there.
So I'd like to speculate just for a second here. Is like I'm what you would say is a heartlander, and so believing that the Book of Mormon happened solely in North America. But after talking to Chief Mitiga and also, reviewing these records, again, it's just a speculation. My thoughts, and also based on the record of the NIM, is that they centralized around Colorado or Utah mainly, and that more of the activity between the Lamanites and Nephites happened in North and Southern Northern America. So like from Ohio up,
Yeah.
or the Nephites, and then the Lamanites were basically in Mexico, New Mexico, all the way down to Florida or over to Florida. But then like with Chief Mitiga, he suggested that the Aztecs, they were the people of Hagoth at some point, but they, after Christ came, they got really serious and really extreme about the words of Christ, and so they came to South America or Central America and got really kind of crazy. So people really didn't want to be associated with them. At least that's what he said in our one of our last podcasts. So I'm just kind of like, I don't. What are your thoughts about that?
Mounds, maybe.
The mounds. There's a lot. So there's one guy, and he's right before the Book of Moroni. His name is. Why am I drawing a blank?
It doesn't matter.
Anyways, he built up these defenses. He saw the vision. He had a vision that the Lord gave him of the encroaching Nephite Lamanite war, and he built up. He's like, he could see all the destruction that was coming in, and they could
Captain Moroni
coming from the south.
Captain Moroni.
No. In the NEM.
In the NEM record.
Oh, okay.
You want to look at that? Just look at that.
While you're looking that up, I did research mounds.
Here, I got it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Met was the guy, and he was in charge of like protecting everything. And so he said, let's get out of these small cities. Let's get everybody into a big city and build fortifications around it. And they described fortifications in 3 different chapters throughout the Nemenhah record.
Yeah.
And while they're describing those, they fit exactly what we have found archaeologically in North America. We find these defensive structures, these settlements that were built in order to protect and prevent people from getting in. The evidence of them is it's you can find it with LiDAR, where they remove all the leaves of the trees. They've gone to the actual sites and they've done it. A man by the name of Wayne May has a lot of extensive research on these mounds.
Yeah.
They call them the Hopewell mounds.
Yeah,
Hopewell is just the last name of the person that discovered the mounds. So it's not related to a tribe or anything like that. It's just Hopewell was the guy that discovered it. It's the Hopewell mounds.
David, when are we having Wayne May on, brother?
Yeah.
No, we have a date, don't we? Isn't it July 9th?
It's very
he's coming
soon.
on.
Awesome.
He's coming on in July. So, and for all of you that hopefully we'll get this out before the event, but there is an event June 21st and 22nd, a Book of Mormon event. I think it's somewhere in Spanish Fork or something like that. It's a Wayne May event. So make sure, get your tickets, $75. There's going to be some amazing speakers. Chief Mitiga's coming to town. And we're going to be doing some stuff there. So just make sure that you come to that event. Okay.
Things are about to
Sorry.
get exciting.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's awesome.
So go
The
ahead.
video that I saw with Wayne May, he was thinking that they were all Nephite and Lamanite settlements. And, if they're Nemenha settlements, they still are Nephite and Lamite. They just, the ones
Yeah.
that often went north.
Well,
100%.
it'll be interesting to see what Wayne thinks about it too.
Yeah.
I do want to make a quick reference about mounds. And maybe Shane, you might be able to reference this if you're familiar. At one point in the Old Testament, before Moses actually, before the children of Israel actually go into the Canaanite lands, which later become Jerusalem, and Israel, I understand that there was a point in time the Jews did create a mound. It's described as they put heaps of earth on top of, in some form or fashion. It was because of some sort of process or maybe ritual. Does that sound familiar at all, Shane, to you?
No, I'm not big into the mound game.
Well,
So.
Okay.
even in the Nemenha record, I think was it Moroni that found they found the mounds themselves. So some of the mounds were already there before the Nemenha went up in there, and that
Could have been from the Jaredites, right?
The Jaredites,
The
yeah.
Jaredites.
Yeah.
And even
Very
people,
wild.
yeah, they're like what Midigas says is that there were people there, even at the time of Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah.
David,
Okay.
Chat GPT tells us that Joseph he built an altar in the Mount Ebal, was instructive of Moses. The altar was made of uncut stones. The stone mound in Gilgal, Joshua built these on Jordan. Jacob's pillar. Those are the only 3 references in the Book of Mormon of mounds or.
Yeah.
What about Old Testament?
Well, yeah, that was
Any-
Old Testament. What did I
That
say?
was
Okay,
Old
great.
Testament. Okay.
I'm
Pull
gonna
up
open up the link.
pull up that other link.
I am.
So Joseph can see, this is what the church has in their archives.
Okay. About to share my screen.
The
Here we go.
thing that we stumbled upon this another way, but the thing that was the most shocking is that it's listed under. Look at the bottom right-hand corner, Book of Mormon Apocrypha. So the church has already categorized it as Book of Mormon Apocrypha. Just because it's on here doesn't mean that they're accepting it as true. There's stuff about